I'm sure people, if you've been following this, are familiar a bit about Hind's story, Hind Rajab, who was a little 6-year-old girl, I believe she was 6 years old, who was missing. And Hind Rajab was found killed after many days of searching for her. She was killed by Israeli fire. She was in a car because her mother thought that it would be safer for her to go with her aunt and I think cousin, they all died, in a car to flee and go to safety. And they were driving through an area of the Gaza Strip. She was, I think, in the car, and those around her had been killed. Bradley, can you verify that for me? Her story, essentially. Basically, she'd been missing. She was inside of a car where her other
bodies.
family members, right, had been killed previously, and she called rescue workers, and she was trying to reach them, and she said that she was scared, speaking to the emergency dispatchers, that she was fearful for her life, and was begging somebody to come and save her, essentially. And then the Palestinian Red Crescent workers did come and said that they were going to come for her, and within yards of one another, the car that she was in was struck, as was the aid, basically ambulance. They were on their way to her, and the Red Crescent workers, as well as Hind, were killed.
Murdered by Israel.
Murdered by Israel. And this was not an area where there was active fighting with Hamas and the IDF. It was a purposeful strike. So with all of that context, and I believe that was really more from memory, so I apologize if I missed something. But those are the broad strokes of the story. Prem Taker, who we've had on this program with The Intercept, asked State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller about this story, and here's how he responded.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. I have a couple questions on Gaza. It's been over 2 weeks since Israeli forces attacked Hind Rajab's family, killing her aunt, uncle, and cousins, leaving her trapped alone in her vehicle. We heard her pleas to the Red Crescent Society. 2 medics were sent, all to be blown up allegedly by Israeli forces. I wanted to ask about the status of the inquiry into this, just because it seems if the Israeli government, which seemingly does have a pretty sophisticated operation, is prioritizing this, and they don't already know which soldiers to interview, for instance. They have Red Crescent calls, timestamps, the location of the Red Crescent staff to, question and rely on. Plenty of material to figure out who exactly to inquire with and to figure out who to hold accountable. So I want to first ask about the status of this investigation.
Sure. So I think that question is appropriately directed to the government of Israel. I will say on behalf of the United States, we have made clear to them that we want that incident to be investigated. They have told us they are investigating it. It's our understanding that investigation is not yet complete. Should direct questions to them about where it stands, but we want to see it completed as soon as possible. And as I said from this podium several days ago, if accountability is appropriate, we want to see accountability put in place.
I'm going to follow up to that before the second one. Is just similarly with regards to Al Jazeera cameraman Samir Abu Daqqa being left to bleed out, while Israeli forces reportedly stalled medics from reaching him. I know that previously you have said there's investigations into that. Is there any updates on?
I don't have any update on that. Again, we press the government of Israel on these matters, and at times I'm able to comment on specific incidents from here where we've gotten answers, but ultimately those are questions that are directed to the government of Israel.
Thank you. Okay, and then the last question. As you said,
there was another part that Prem talked to him about, and he was like, I have a meeting to go to. That was part of how he ended that press conference. I don't understand how, the United States seems to just, under Biden, the State Department, the default position is to take the government of Israel's account of their own crimes at face value. And yet there is constant doubt cast upon like the Hamas health ministry numbers or whatever. And when you determine that and you look into it, they're actually undercounts. Like Euromed Monitor has a much higher death count because they take into account the folks that are presumed dead because they're missing or under rubble. And the numbers that we've seen come out of Gaza from the Palestinian Health Ministry have been extremely accurate. And though Biden at the start was like, I don't know how much you could trust those numbers. And Netanyahu still says that publicly. He was saying that on Sunday on American television. And yet, like, I can't even keep track of the amount of times the Israeli government has lied. They have lied about basically everything. They lied about the October 7th attack. It was initially 1,400 dead. It's 1,200. That went completely unnoticed by the mainstream press. The 40 decapitated babies thing was a myth. The circumstances surrounding the first hospital that was struck have still not been corroborated. The fact that they said it was a Hamas rocket, and now they've bombed every hospital, decimated every hospital in the Gaza Strip, so you should definitely have not taken that account at face value. They lied about Hamas tunnels. They lied about Hamas command centers. They have lied about the civilian death ratio. They have lied about every single thing. And so we're still counting on them to do some sort of assessment of their murder of this 6-year-old who was pleading for help in a non-combat zone where she saw a tank approaching her and she felt in her last moments that fear. And then they also struck the aid workers that were getting so close to being able to pull her out. What, you know, the arrogance of just saying that we're going with Israel's assessment of this. I don't know how much longer this is tenable, honestly.
Well, what we're saying is we're joining them in genocide, which is what all of our government and all Western governments have been doing since the ICJ said, yeah, plausibly genocide, and we said, oh, look at UNRWA. We've taken the darkest path possible with regards to our actions here, and this is no more honest than you would expect from the Fourth Reich.
Yeah, and I mean, it always seems like for issues like this, same for when the sniper, I forget when it was last year or maybe before, assassinated that
2022 Shireen Abu Akleh.
Yeah, assassinated that journalist, and the goal is to delay people, hopefully until they forget and they move on to something else. Yeah. And so each individual story just becomes like a memory as we move to the next atrocity, which they lie about. And you know, I think we see it with our own government and with the Western governments in general. No matter how many lies you've made in the past, that's never a sufficient reason to disbelieve the government in the minds of some people. You know, unfortunately, those people also tend to be some of, you know, the less critical journalists that are in charge of informing people. So I think we just have a culture that lacks accountability because it's also a culture that lacks any kind of real critical memory of what happens in these kinds of events. And even though we're seeing it happen in real time and people are pointing out the lies in real time, once it's over, hopefully due to a permanent ceasefire, people will pretend like there was no way to know about this. Unfortunately, I think for a lot of Democrats and a lot of pundits, we're not living in post 9/11 America anymore. There is going to be a permanent record of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
AIPAC was founded in the 50s to throw sand in the eyes of Americans noticing that Zionists massacre Palestinians. This is, they've been lying since October 7th. The country has only ever lied.
It's built on a lie.
Built on lies and murder.
It's built on a lie. There's no collective understanding of the Nakba in this country, by the way. I mean, there was that clip of that MSNBC reporter who said that the Nakba was in dispute. Yep. Can you imagine, like, if a reporter went on television and was like, you know, I don't know, pick one atrocity that we have in our collective memory. Be a Holocaust denialist? Denying that slavery was a real problem or that slaves were taken and against their will. We do deny
that.
We have pretty much similar pathology, just less acute.
Yeah, certainly. But I mean, the fact that a mainstream reporter was saying that was in any way in dispute. I mean, these are well documented historical atrocities, but the documentation, it's still not trickling into the West, and that's by design. Like, all of these Israeli new historians that speak about this stuff, the fact that they're kind of they relied on these archives that were kept under wraps by the Israeli government for many decades, where a lot of information was kept from the public, and no one trusted the Palestinian people in the West because of racism.
Yep.
And the fact that they are just an Arab group of people, they didn't have permission to narrate their own stories. And it's the same exact thing where we see Hamas mass rape, Hamas mass rape, Hamas mass rape. Well, we hear documentation of sexual abuse of Palestinian people. Does that get any? I mean, there
Israel is
was a bill
using
on the House floor.
starvation of
Yeah.
people like as a weapon, and so they have to talk about using sex as a weapon and rape as a weapon because it's like not meant to be taken seriously or really engaged with on a rational level. It's just lies by murderers.